Amnesty International South Africa says urgent measures need to be put in place to ensure that there is accountability for the failure of the South African Police Service to effectively and thoroughly investigate cases of sexual and gender-based violence. They say SAPS is continually failing victims of these crimes, as seen in the matters of Popi, Qwabe and Bongeka, Phungula, as well as the Krugersdorp rapes. Now, to discuss this a bit more further, we're now joined by Communications Officer at Amnesty International, Genevieve Quintal, and she joins us via our Zoom link. Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Perhaps maybe let's start off here. Of course, we've seen that package play a bit earlier on. The message coming out there from President Cyril Ramaphosa, also calling on for women in this country to come up with more powerful movements, of course, to take up the arms against gender-based violence. What are your thoughts on that matter?
Good evening, Bali, and thank you so much for having me. It's all good and well that we've got strong movements, we've got strong women in this country who are fighting against gender-based violence every single day. But if we're not having cases properly investigated and thoroughly investigated and perpetrators being brought to book, then there's no deterrent for those who are perpetrating gender-based violence and sexual assault. We've said time and time again, it's quite clear that there needs to be a complete overhaul of the SAPS and its investigation system so that it's fit for purpose to deal with these extremely high levels of gender-based violence. We continue to speak out, but yet there's no accountability from the police. Research from the Medical Research Council found that the highest rate of attrition of reported rape cases in the criminal justice system occurs at the police level. So without SAPS conducting thorough investigations, the NPA cannot successfully prosecute, and crimes continue with impunity. And that's what our message is. We're calling for accountability on this. Those who aren't doing their jobs properly need to be held accountable.
And in your statement, Genevieve, you speak of a broken criminal justice system that we have, and of course saying that accountability needs to be taken. Perhaps maybe you can just give us a bit of insight. In your statement, you named a couple of those cases which you say have been failed by the investigations done by the SAPS.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier Popi and Bongeka, two young women who were murdered in 2017 on a night out in Soweto. It's now 2023 and there's still no justice. Their families are still waiting to hear what's going to happen. There've been no arrests. There was shoddy investigations in that matter. Evidence wasn't collected properly. Their possessions were found on taxi drivers at the time. The case was reopened last year after Amnesty International had campaigned on their case. The matter was then sent back to the National Prosecuting Authority, and last month the National Prosecuting Authority let us know that there isn't enough evidence to prosecute. However, maybe a positive in that case is that they have sent it to the Protea Magistrates Court for an inquest. I think another great example is the Krugersdorp gang rapes from last year. Again, people were arrested. There was this big hoo-ha around, and then they go to court and the charges are dropped because there's not enough evidence. And I think thirdly, the case this week of that young 4-year-old girl who was raped and murdered. Again, the case doesn't go ahead because there's not enough evidence. The National Prosecuting Authority can only prosecute if they have enough evidence, and the investigation is handled by the SAPS. We know SAPS are facing a number of challenges, including corruption, inadequate training, insufficient resources, and all of this is resulting in poor investigations, which further results in a lack of trust from the public.
And Genevieve, I just wanted to come to exactly that. Where is the police failing in its investigations? I mean, you've mentioned especially another case. It's a year on. Last year, there was this big spotlight under, the Krugersdorp rapes, and there was a number of people arrested. We were then told by police that they are prioritizing this matter. But, a few days later, we saw those suspects, being let go. Where are they going wrong when it comes to the investigation? Is it a capacity issue? What's the problem here when it comes to thoroughly investigating these cases?
Well, the police definitely need to improve on the quality and efficiency of their investigations, which is really crucial to ensuring that there's successful prosecutions. So, they also need to be, that means providing sufficient resources, investing in training programs for investigators, enhancing our forensic capacities. We've seen the DNA backlog issue, the strengthening of specialized units which tackle specific crimes such as gender-based violence. All of these can lead to effective investigations. And there also needs to be collaboration between the police, prosecution services and other relevant agencies, which is essential to streamlining information sharing to ensure seamless coordination. We've also said that a huge part of this is respecting human rights and promoting professionalism within the police force, which is paramount. Training programs should also emphasize human rights principles, cultural sensitivities, and unbiased policing. This is why there's a lot of changing that needs to be done, but also those who are not doing their work properly. And we're not saying that every police officer is not doing their work properly. We're not saying that every investigation is a problem, but those who aren't doing their job properly need to be held accountable, need to be taken to task for that.
And Genevieve, do you think that it's possible to turn things around in our current police service systems? You have mentioned what needs to be done and what needs to be prioritized here, but is there an appetite coming out from the police service?
Well, we've spoken about that. There seems to be no political will. There's all these talks, and I think you also mentioned earlier, a big crime happens. It's all over the media space. The police minister goes out there, speaks to the media, and then nothing happens. There needs to be an appetite. There needs to be a will to want to change things. And so the people need to be held accountable. If the police officers aren't being held accountable, we need to then ask the police commissioner, the police minister, why are these police officers not being held accountable? And if we're not getting answers from them, we need to go to the president, who's the overall leader of government, who also needs to hold his ministers accountable. And it's his duty and oath to all people living in South Africa. We can no longer allow this to continue without proper action and accountability.
Genevieve, thank you so much for your time and your contributions. That is Genevieve Quintal from Amnesty International, the communications officer there.